Okay,
Go sit up.
Okay, boss.
we're up. We're on.
Get over there. You can get over there across the next door. That's
Hello, everybody.
right there.
You want to do this thing here? Welcome to Tuesday Night Bible Study. Hello, Facebook. Hello, tape. Tonight, before we get started, I want to say thank you to the girls that did the cooking. There was Lori, Renee, and Margie. We had fried chicken, mashed potatoes and gravy, spinach, carrot cake, tea. It was awesome. You guys out there don't know what you're missing. It was great. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
Tonight, while we were eating, we were talking about keeping your spiritual fuel tank full. And I'll just cover briefly. It's kind of like if you don't do that, keep your fuel tank full spiritually, you will run into spiritual problems because Satan is out there always trying to steal, kill, and destroy. So the only way to protect against that is to do the four basic things. If you had a car, it would be, making sure you got air in your tires, fuel in your tank, oil in the thing, and water for your windshields. Spiritually, we're talking about prayer, reading your Bible, going to church, and tithing.
I forgot which one.
So the question becomes, well, I'm sure that we have all run out of spiritual fuel. So what do you do in those times? What do you do in those instances? And the answer is very simple. You go back to square one, you start over, and you do the four things that you know you're supposed to do. Read your Bible, pray, go to church, and tithe. And you do that every single day. Now, it's not like you can't miss a day or you can't miss a time. It's just like putting gas in your car. You don't have to do it every day, but you got to make sure you got fuel in your tank. So if you feel like you're getting beat up and Satan's winning, go back and check the basics. Question?
Yeah, when I started listening at you and talking about go back, this is some things we be holding, don't want to give up on.
Well,
It's
sure.
okay to run back. Why run back to the Bible? And you know it's right in the Bible, and God speak about that. Why don't you work on get rid of the garbage that you tend to do? Why
Well, but you can't do
that.
that on an empty fuel tank. You can't do that when you are spiritually empty. All you can do when you're spiritually empty is to fill your tank up and then go fight. Because the fight isn't yours.
The battle is not ours.
Right. That's correct. But you can't fight if you don't have fuel to fight. So,
But people do have.
but we do have strongholds, sure. We all have issues. We all have problems. We all have our sin that we don't want to give up.
Right.
So, and that's usually where Satan will attack. But don't concentrate on the sin. I said earlier, when the sin or the world or the problem or your mountain, whatever you want to call it, when that becomes bigger than Jesus is to you spiritually, that's when you have a problem. So whenever you take a look at where you are spiritually and you realize that your problem, and I use the example, your dog died, the car broke down, your washer and dryer broke down, your wife left you, and you lost your home. That's issues, okay? When those issues become bigger than Jesus is to you spiritually, that's a problem. That's when you need to get back to the basics. I was telling somebody earlier today, they were telling me about the problems they were having, and I said, you're concentrating on the problem. Don't concentrate on the problem. Concentrate on your relationship with Jesus, and He'll take care of that. And I said, when you do the four basic, and I've known this person for a lot of years, when you do those four basic things, Jesus takes care of your car and your washer and dryer, and things just seem to happen He takes care of those things. And they said, yes, that's right. And I said, it's when you start concentrating on those things that everything goes wrong. And to use today's vernacular is because these things become your God, and your God becomes a thing. Okay? So anyway, that's what we talked about while we're eating. So we're going to pick up our Bible study where we left off. We're in 1 Kings chapter 3, as I've been told, verse 16.
Yeah.
All right. 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 16. I love this story, by the way. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Now 2 women who were harlots came to the king and stood before him. And one woman said, O my lord, this woman and I dwell in the same house, and I gave birth while she was in the house. Then it happened, the 3rd day after I had given birth, that this woman also gave birth, and we were together. No one was with us at the house except the 2 of us in the house. And this woman's son died in the night because she lay on him. So she arose in the middle of the night and took my son from my side, while your maidservant slept, and laid him in her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom. And when I rose in the morning to nurse my son, there he was, dead. But when I had examined him in the morning, indeed, he was not my son whom I had borne. Then the other woman said, No, but the living one is my son, and the dead one is your son. And the first woman said, No, but the dead one is your son, and the living one is my son. Thus they spoke before the king.
Okay, just so we know where we're at. Does everybody understand what's going on? Okay. So they bring the problem, they can't seem to resolve the problem, so they bring it to the king. Now remember, Solomon has already prayed to have wisdom, and he has wisdom given to him from God. What does Solomon say?
And the king said, the one says, This is my son who lives, and your son is the dead one. And the other one says, No, but your son is the dead one, and my son is the living one. Then the king said, Bring me a sword. So they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, Divide the living child in 2, and give half to one and half to the other.
Okay, stop. Okay, that sounds pretty gruesome. But you got 2 females fighting over one baby. How can you resolve that so that each one of them gets the right desserts and the right thing is done? Do you just pick one? Do you decide who's telling the truth and who's lying? I've been alive long enough to know I can't tell the difference. So what do? You let the women decide. And how do you do that? Let's hear the story.
Then the woman whose son was living spoke to the king, for she yearned with compassion for her son, and she said, O my lord, give her the living child, and by no means kill him.
There you go. That's how you do it. You play on the woman's ability to be a mother. The one whose child it's not doesn't care about the baby. The mother always cares about the baby, so he plays on that. And so when she says, no, let him live and she can raise it, then Solomon knows who the real mother is. Then what happens?
But the other said, Let him be neither mine nor yours, but divide him. So the king answered and said, Give the first woman the living child, and by no means kill him. She is his mother.
Yep.
And all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had rendered, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to administer justice.
That's awesome. Now, from that story, from that one thing that happened, I have always thought this was interesting. Read that second paragraph again. Now, he's had one story, one problem brought before him. He shows some wisdom, and this is what Israel drew from this.
What verse there?
28.
And all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had rendered, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to administer justice.
From that one story, they saw the wisdom of God in him. Now let me ask you a question. Do people see the wisdom of God in you? First off, how many of you pray for wisdom from God? Okay. You should. Because the Bible says that God will give that in abundance. All you have to do is ask. So then the question is, do you execute judgment among people? I don't know. I think that people that say they execute wisdom probably don't. I mean, if it's part of your character to be wise, how will you recognize if you are wise or not? But if you are not wise and you pretend to be wise and somebody says, "Are you wise?" then your answer is yes. So the answer to, do people see the wisdom of God in you? The answer probably should be, I don't know. But the answer will be different if you ask the people that are around you. Have you ever heard the old saying, if you want to know if the husband is a good husband, look at the wife? You ever heard that saying? Yeah. Why is that? If you ask the husband, he'll say, yeah, I'm a good husband. I do this and this and this and this. But why do they say look at the wife? Because it's the other person that sees who, what, when, where, why, and how you are. And I think it's the same when we look at wisdom. You ask me, yeah, I'm a wise guy. Ask the people that are around me, and they'll tell you if I'm wise or not. That's why we need to pray for it. You can't recognize it if you haven't. The question is, do other people see it in you? And we know that it's easily available. All we have to do is pray. And all we have to do is listen and keep our fuel tank full. Go ahead.
So King Solomon was king over all Israel.
Okay, stop. I just want to remind everybody why that sentence is important. Now remember, before Solomon was King David. When David took over, he spent 7 years being king over just Hebron. And it was through God's power that he brought the country together, brought all of the tribes together, made him king, expanded the territory, protected the people, and gave him victory over all of his enemies, and eventually gave him peace in the kingdom. So when it says here that Solomon was king over all of Israel, Solomon is really the first king to take over a full Israel. David brought them together, but he was not king when he took over of all of Israel. Solomon is. And he's king over all of Israel because of God and because of his father David. Go ahead.
And these were his officials: Azariah, the son of Zadok, the priest; Elihoreph and Ahijah, the sons of Shisha, scribes; Jehoshaphat, the son of...
Okay, these names aren't going to mean a whole lot. Go down to verse 7.
I can't pronounce them anyway.
Right.
And Solomon had 12 governors over all Israel, who provided food for the king and his household. Each one...
Okay. Remember I told you last week that numbers mean something in the Bible? Here we have 12 governors over all of Israel. The number 12 is the number of government. There was 12 disciples. Here's there's 12 governors, huh?
There was 12 tribes.
And 12 tribes. Okay, 12 is a number of government. Okay, go ahead.
Each one made provision for 1 month of the year. These are their names: Ben-Hur in the mountains of Ephraim, Ben-Decker and Machaz.
Okay, go to verse 20.
Judah and Israel were as numerous as the sand by the sea in multitude, eating and drinking and rejoicing. So Solomon reigned over all kingdoms, over the river to the land of the Philistines, as far as the border of Egypt. They brought tribute and served Solomon all the days of his life.
Okay, so we're starting out with the kingdom of Solomon. And he's going through laying out his government. And it tells you who the 12 governors were and who the people that took care of different parts of the government was. And they're just letting you know that he is over all of Israel. And then it says each governor took care of 1 month provision for all of the tribes. Now the last part is the geography of Israel, telling you how big the land is that Israel has. Okay? So now we have the geography of Israel, we have the tribes of Israel, and we have a whole picture of exactly how big and how complete the tribes of Israel are. Go ahead.
Now Solomon's provision for one day was 30 cores of fine flour, 60 cores of meal, 10 fatted oxen, 20 oxen from the pastures, and 100 sheep, besides deer, gazelles, roebucks, and fatted fowl.
All right, when it says Solomon's provisions for one day, what does that mean?
What he needed to get by, the supplies and stuff.
For what? All of Israel? For a tribe? For what? I mean, let's look at what he's going through
That would
here.
be quite a bit for one person.
He says
I would say it'd be
30 for one day, 30 cores of fine flour. Let's say that means pounds. 60 pounds of meal. 10 fatted oxen. Do you know how big a fatted oxen is? 20 oxen from the pastures and 100 sheep, besides deer, gazelles, roebucks, and fatted fowl. That is a lot of meat.
It'd be for all Israel, it wouldn't be.
Nope. Just for the palace.
Just for the palace for one day.
Just for the palace for one day. Now that'll give you an idea of how big. Remember, physically and spiritually, when David said, "These people will eat at the king's table," remember I said that was a blessing to be able to eat at the king's table, just like we're going to eat at Jesus' table. Well, in order to do that, you have to be able to feed them. You've got all of the government that has to eat. Then you've got all the household staff, you got all the wives, all the concubines. That's a lot of people to feed every day. And you can tell by the food. And I'm going to read this list again so you get an idea. 30 pounds of flour, 60 pounds of meal, 10 fatted oxen. That's basically 10 cows. 20 cows from the pastures, 100 sheep, and then deer, gazelles, roebucks, and fatted out. That is a lot of meat. Can you imagine being a butcher trying to kill that meat every day and skin it and feed it? So anyway, just to give you an idea of how big the government is and how big the king's table was at every meal. Okay, go ahead.
For he had dominion over all the region on this side of the river, from Tifsa even to Gaza, namely over all the kings on this side of the river. And he had peace on every side all around him. And Judah and Israel dwelt safely, each man under his vine and his fig tree, from Dan as far as Beersheba, all the days of Solomon.
Okay, so what is that paragraph telling you?
First of all, his dominion was huge.
That's correct.
What verse were you on, John?
I
Just finished 25.
Yeah.
25.
The key here, once you get past the size, is, and he had peace on every side all around him. Now, this is why that's important. Remember, David wanted to build God's house, right? And God told him no. Why did he tell David no?
Because he had blood on his hands.
That's exactly right. It's not that he, well, I guess he did kill one guy, but most of it was because of war. And it was all blessed by God, but it was still blood on his hands. So here, God wants Solomon to build his house. So God is giving him peace, so he won't have blood on his hands. And it makes a point of saying there was peace all around. So he didn't have to go to war. He didn't have to kill anybody. God gave him peace because God had a message or a job for him. Which, by the way, this is an interesting thing, spiritually speaking. Where did she go?
Shannon, I heard.
She went home.
Or Shannon went home, yeah.
Oh, okay. Do we know
I'm
why?
getting it. Sorry.
Okay. So anyway, when you are in the middle of God's will, which Solomon is at this point, when you are in the middle of God's will, God manages to give you peace around you. Now that doesn't mean things don't happen and things don't go wrong. It just means you have peace. Now, when you are not in God's will, no matter how good things are going, you don't have peace. How many times have you heard that rich people have everything in the world and they're the most miserable people on the earth? Okay? That's because they are not in God's will. So that the reason I say that is it's a barometer for you. If you wake up one day and find somehow that you don't have peace and haven't had for a while, you need to ask yourself, am I in God's will? I mean, as an example, if you know that your gift is greeting people, to be a greeter, and you know that that's your gift, and you don't go to church for a while, you will eventually not feel peaceful because you're not doing what you should be doing. On the other hand, if you do it, you may be tired a lot. You may have issues. You might worry about the money to do what you need to. But you will always have peace as long as you're in God's will. Am I right? Yeah. That's why some pastors, in fact, most every pastor that I've known, they work ungodly hours, and they work like dogs. But if you ask them, they will tell you, "I have peace. I would rather do nothing else."
They're really not going to really tell you the truth.
Huh?
They're really not going to really tell you the truth.
No, that is the truth. If I'm in God, okay. I will be 60 in 2 years. And if you take both of my jobs plus the ministry that I do, I work about 85 hours a week. Okay? Most of the guys that are less than half of my age cannot do that schedule. I'd have it no other way. In fact, I get bored sometimes because I'm not out doing the things that I know still need to be done. You can run forever in God's will, but you can't run very long without God's will.
Okay, thank you.
That is a spiritual truth. And that's one of the messages that is coming through in this. Solomon is in God's will, and he has peace all around him. Because God has a job for him. All right? Go ahead.
Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen. And these governors, each man in his month, provided food for King Solomon and for all who came to King Solomon's table. There was no lack in their supply. They also brought barley and straw to the proper place for the horses and steeds, each man according to his charge. And God gave Solomon wisdom and exceedingly great understanding and largeness of heart, like the sand on the seashore. Thus Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the men of the east and all the wisdom of Egypt. For he was wiser than all men, than Ethan the Ezrahite, and Heman, Jalcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahol, and his fame was in all the surrounding nations. He spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. Also he spoke of trees, from the cedar tree of Lebanon even to the hyssop that springs out of the wall. He spoke also of animals, of birds, of creeping things, and of fish. And men of all nations, from all the kings of the earth, who had heard of his wisdom, came to hear the wisdom of Solomon.
Okay. So, in this passage, we are seeing the fruit of his prayer to God for wisdom. And God has given him abundant wisdom, not only of the baby's story that he told, but of animals and plants. And his wisdom was so abundant that people from all around the world had heard about Solomon, and they all brought him tribute. They all wanted to hear of him. And not only could he speak it, but he was writing it. He talked about his proverbs and about his songs. We have a book in the Bible called Song of Solomon. We have a book in the Bible called Proverbs. This is all wisdom from God through Solomon. Okay? All right, go ahead.
Now Hiram, king of Tyre, sent his servants to Solomon, because he heard that they had anointed him king in place of his father. For Hiram had always loved David. Then Solomon sent to Hiram, saying,
Okay, hang on a minute. So, David and the king of Tyre were close friends. And so David dies, Solomon, his son, becomes king, and the king of Tyre reaches out. And he sends him a letter. And this is what the letter says.
You know how my father David could not build a house for the name of the Lord his God, because of the wars which were fought against him on every side, until the Lord put his foes under the soles of his feet. But now the Lord my God has given me rest on every side. There is neither adversary nor evil occurrence. And behold, I propose to build a house for the name of the Lord my God, as the Lord spoke to my father David, saying, Your son, whom I will set on your throne in your place, he shall build the house for my name. Now therefore command that they cut down cedars for me from Lebanon, and my servants will be with your servants, and I will pay you wages for your servants, according to whatever you say. For you know there is none among us who has skill to cut timber like the Sidonians. So it was, when Hiram heard the words of Solomon, that he rejoiced greatly and said, Blessed be the Lord this day.
Okay, so hang on a minute. So, Solomon is not king very long, and he sets out to build God's house. Now, David has set aside all that he could, the gold, the silver, the money. So now Solomon's going to get down to the nitty-gritty. Now, he has trees, but he doesn't have the types of trees and the number of trees that he wants. The cedars of Sidon are a special type of tree. So he writes a letter to the king, who was friends with David, and said, Hey, I need your trees, I'll pay you whatever it is you say, and I need your help with your servants, and I'll pay you whatever it is you need for that, but I need the trees. And the first sentence is, So it was when Hiram heard the words of Solomon that he rejoiced greatly and said, Go ahead.
Blessed be the Lord this day, for he has given David a wise son over this great people. Then Hiram sent to Solomon, saying, I have considered the message which you sent me, and I will do all you desire concerning the cedar and cypress logs.